Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane. It's the morning of Friday, the 2nd of February, 2018. And I'm on the slopes of Leith Hill in Surrey, just outside the town of Dorking. And it's a beautiful morning. It's very still. The tranquility is only disturbed by being on the flight path out of Gatwick Airport, it would seem, this morning, and the occasional passing car. And the view here is stunning. Right across the Weald of southern England, Surrey, looking down into Sussex, and in the distance, the South Downs. And of course, the other side of the South Downs is the South Coast. Now, the incredible thing is that 1/4 of the UK population lives within a radius of 75 miles of here. So that's some 15 million people, and of course it encompasses the conurbation of London. Yet, few people have actually driven this road. Few people within the southeast of England actually know where Leith Hill is. And if they know where it is, they've very little idea about how to access it, because it's not particularly well signposted, and that's a good thing, really, because it is one of the few unspoiled areas in the southeast of England completely untouched by development. Any houses here have been certainly running into 100 years plus old. It's very unlikely that anyone would get planning permission to build on the slopes of Leith Hill now. It is an area of truly outstanding natural beauty. Now, I'm just about half a mile away from the village of Coldharbour. Now, Coldharbour is actually regarded as, ironically, one of the most remote villages in the southeast of England. I mean, it's barely, 4 miles, maybe 5 from Dorking, and yet there are many people in Dorking that never venture up Leith Hill. You know, when you live that close, it's always something that you can do tomorrow, but tomorrow never comes. Yet, Europa, an unconventional hydrocarbon extraction company, another cowboy company, have permission to establish a pad here on the slopes of Leith Hill, about half a mile from the village of Coldharbour. And yet, despite the fact that 1/4 of the population lives within a 75-mile radius of here, Europa are working on the basis that nobody really gives a damn, because everybody's so busy trying to pay off their outrageous mortgage or keep up with the Joneses and make sure they've got the latest toys. They don't have the time to even consider the implications of an unconventional hydrocarbon well being established in this ancient forest. And of course, ultimately, if these few wells do yield any kind of return, unlikely, but whether it's Brockham, whether it's Horse Hill, whether it's Billingshurst, Markswell's Wood, or down at Rowland's Castle, or Lidsey down just the other side of the South Downs there. If it's any of these areas, then the whole of the Weald here potentially becomes a target. So Europa have submitted another traffic management plan, because when you drive these roads, and there's a few people, I'm sure, watching this from the southeast of England, and if you have never ventured to Leith Hill, then I would absolutely implore you to do so. It's just a few miles off of the M25, probably not even 15 minutes outside of rush hour from the Leatherhead or even the Reigate junction on the M25 to come up to this stunning area. The walks here through these ancient forests and more recent forests planted by the Forestry Commission are truly outstanding. You can enjoy tranquility here like very few other places in the southeast of England, and see what a nonsense it is for Europa to even begin to think that they can get oil field infrastructure up these ancient, narrow, sunken lanes without causing further damage. To say nothing, of course, of the damage that they will cause to the ecology from the exploitation and extraction process. And yesterday I tweeted out some photographs of the area of forest which Europa have marked out as their prospective pad. And it truly is an obscenity. So I fully realise that, you know, if this message does get out there, then Leith Hill could be pretty busy this weekend. And that would be wonderful. That would be truly wonderful, because then people could swing by, visit the Leith Hill Protection Camp and meet the people who are camped just off the roadside in an effort to raise awareness in this densely populated southeast of England, although you'd never believe it if you're standing where I am right now, and do whatever it is that needs to be done to raise awareness of this abomination. Now, there are a few more days. In fact, the date for objections to Europa's latest traffic management plan, which of course we know ultimately isn't worth the paper it's written on, but it's still an opportunity to get those objections in. And they have to be in by next Wednesday. That's Wednesday, the 7th of February. So if you are in the southeast of England and you have 3 or 4 hours that you can spare over the course of this coming weekend or next weekend, then please take a trip to Leith Hill. And if you can allow a bit more time, that'll give you time not only to visit the Leith Hill Protection Camp, but also visit the stunning village of Coldharbour and enjoy one of the walks up to the Leith Hill Tower, which is a folly on the top of Leith Hill being 965 feet above sea level, and the tower built to take it to just over 1,000 feet. It's a beautiful walk, and if it's a clear day, you have stunning views all across the southeast of England. So that's Leith Hill. So I know much of the focus has been on the north of England recently, and rightly so, because of course the north of England isn't just being targeted in the odd pocket like the southeast of England. It's being targeted right across the whole of the country, from the Lancashire coast to the Yorkshire coast, with the exception of a few areas in the High Pennines. And of course the focus has been very much at Kirby Misperton for the last 3 months, where Third Energy, or Barclays Bank trading as Third Energy, have had their kit sitting on the site there now for nearly 13 weeks. And Greg Clark rightly has consistently found a number of reasons to not sign off on the application to FRACK. Now, as we speculated before the turn of the year, Greg Clark was desperate to be removed from his position of Secretary of State of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, so that it wouldn't be his name on the documents signing off the first FRACK, potentially triggering the devastation of the ecology across the north of England, and forever being associated with the most outrageous political ineptitude, probably of many generations still to come. So, unfortunately for him, he wasn't, because Jeremy Hunt wanted to stay at the NHS and finish the job of destroying the NHS and privatising it and making it pretty much inaccessible to the average working man and woman in the UK, and establishing a private healthcare system that is only available to those who are effectively on the corporate payroll and making their corporate contribution to the UK economy. Anybody else, in the words of Henry Kissinger, is just a useless eater, and they might as well just go away and die. So Jeremy Hunt wants to finish that job, and so he wouldn't go into the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. So Greg Clark, guess what? You're stuck with it. Well, eventually, of course, he did the right thing. And despite the fact that I might want to challenge your statement that Third Energy have met all the technical requirements, depends how closely you look and who you believe, but you have at least stated that you're not happy with the fact that they haven't submitted, once again, their accounts. And in fact, they were nearly 5 months late. But word reached us yesterday that Third Energy have now submitted accounts. Now, this is no doubt a work of total fiction, and they're probably all on total blag mode in an attempt to justify the figures that they have submitted. Now, what is interesting is normally, once accounts are submitted, they are simply published, and that's all there is to it. But on the government website, it says that Third Energy's accounts are being processed. Now, hopefully that means forensically analysed, because it's not just a question now of looking at their 2016 accounts, it's also a question of looking at their financial health. And the reality is that they don't have any. Third Energy are as sick as the NHS under Jeremy Hunt. People, some good people, I'm sure, trying to do the right thing, but nonetheless, when you're working with a dog, then, or a lemon, if you're in the motor industry, then you know what you've got. You cannot turn the proverbial pig's ear into the purse. So, no doubt, Third Energy are working very closely with the Treasury and with Barclays Bank to desperately try and say, yes, all is good, and we're going to sign off on the FRACK. But of course, that will unleash a mass of freedom of information requests to establish exactly who it was that signed these accounts off, who it was that ultimately approved it, assuming it is approved, and basically on what criteria was used to determine that Third Energy is in good financial health, when basically it's apparent to even the most casual observer that it's anything but. So keep the pressure on. Third Energy have not yet fracked at Kirkby Misperton, and they should not be given permission to frack at Kirkby Misperton. And if they are, then basically it needs to be witnessed by as many people as possible, so that people from across the north of England will get some insight as to what is being destined for their community if this absurd and pernicious industry gets the go-ahead. Now, yesterday, of course, was also the first day where iGas were working at Misson Springs, when in reality they should have packed up until September. And funnily enough, the decision to override Clause 21, protecting the breeding grounds of the birds that nest in the site of special scientific interest adjacent to the iGas well site at Misson Springs, was signed off not by the planning committee or not by the full council, but by an officer of Nottinghamshire County Council. So call it a hunch, but I would suggest that getting the extension until March, all that cost iGas was a decent lunch. And, you know, freedom of information requests will be being submitted to find out exactly how many meetings iGas have had with Nottinghamshire County Council and with whom in the process of trying to get this clause, or not just trying now, but getting Clause 21 overridden. Now, there was a fantastic turnout at Misson Springs at the well site yesterday, and hopefully, you know, people from right across the East Midlands will converge on Misson Springs at the well site there in the coming weeks to let iGas and central government know of their displeasure at such a flagrant disregard for a planning condition that was put in place for all the right reasons. But this should give you a clue as to what to expect, because, you know, even though the planning process is supposedly there for a reason, the oil and gas industry works on the basis that one way or another it can get any conditions it doesn't like to be overridden. And as Patrick Henningson has just joined us from 21st Century Wire, and he asked the questions, where are the BBC? Good point. But the BBC, nobody trusts them anyway. But the BBC are certainly not going to be reporting on issues of this magnitude of importance. They're far more interested in reporting on the ongoing issues of equal pay within the BBC. I'm not suggesting that's not an unimportant issue, but in the scheme of things, it's not exactly national news now, is it? So get on to the national media by all means, but this is why the alternative media like 21st Century Wire, like UK Column, and independent broadcasters are so important, because more and more people are realizing that if they want to actually have a handle on the truth, then they need to turn away from the lamestream media and start to get information from multiple sources and relearn the skills of discretion and discernment and determining for themselves, you know, the state of play, rather than simply regurgitating the official narrative. Well, what else have we got going on? Well, the interesting thing is, of course, that the oil price is holding up around about the high 60s right now. But there's a reason for that. And that is because the Saudi analysts in particular are desperately trying to maximize the price of a barrel of oil in these twilight years of a hydrocarbon-driven economy. Now, unfortunately, that still probably means 25, 30, maybe 40 years. But nonetheless, we are now in the twilight years of a hydrocarbon-driven economy. And obviously, the OPEC countries, and particularly Saudi Arabia and the other Middle Eastern countries, want to maximize their revenue opportunities as the market goes into decline. And their analysis is that the shale gas industry on a global basis is totally overhyped. And their analysis is that it is actually costing at least $64 a barrel equivalent to produce unconventional hydrocarbons. Now, I've always maintained that within the UK, the marker is at least $75 a barrel. And although companies in the US have claimed that they can produce unconventional hydrocarbons much cheaper, the Middle Eastern analysts are saying, yeah, but you know, that's manipulating the finances, where we heard that before, and it's not taking account of depreciation, it's not taking account of interest payments, it's not taking account of decommissioning costs, etc., etc. So we know it's a Ponzi scheme on a global basis, and there's no need for it here in the UK whatsoever. But nonetheless, at the moment, we have a handful of politicians that are determined to push this through. But as I've said many times over the last few months, you know, Theresa May has much bigger problems than trying to deal with an industry that really, despite the apparent increase in support for the industry from 13% to 16%, which of course the industry is making great play about. But the bottom line is that the vast majority of people in this country do not want this industry or don't have a view on it. So it's a very, very small number of people pushing an agenda that will, if it kicks off, destroy the ecology of the UK and certainly destroy, you know, the views that I have behind me right now, because there'll be well sites every kilometre or so. Well, meanwhile, what else have we got going on? Yorkshire Post has been continuing its excellent series of features during this week, looking at the potential impact of an unconventional gas industry across God's own county. And the articles have been exceptional, and you know, they try and put balance in, but of course when they're looking for pro-frackers, they have the choice of Lorraine Allinson. Yes, Lorraine Allinson. And despite her denials, she runs a holiday cottage business in North Yorkshire and call it a hunch. But I would suggest that at some point she has received some financial benefits from the presence of Third Energy in North Yorkshire, albeit probably, you know, through her business, a legitimate business of renting accommodation to the itinerant workers brought into the area by Third Energy. It can be the only reason, because nobody in their right mind living in God's own county would embrace this industry unless there was some perceived significant financial gain. Because as we know, the common denominator of everybody associated with this industry, and sadly the rampant corporatism that this country is in the grip of, the motivation is greed, greed, and yet more greed. So if you get an opportunity, do punch in Yorkshire Post online. Unfortunately, I think you do have to register, but it's free. to get access to the articles and take a look at some of the excellent articles that they've been running over the past few days. Now, also in the north of England, next week, Andy Georgiou of Food and Water Watch is going to be doing a mini tour across FRACK Rydale, and I believe also in Eckington in North Derbyshire. And Andy Georgiou has been on a mission to expose the incompetence, the inadequacies, and the arrogance of Jim Ratcliffe and INEOS. So if you get the opportunity to attend one of Andy Georgiou's events across Rydale or in Eckington, then I would suggest that it's going to be well worth your while. And if you want to get the details of those, then do check out the FRACK Rydale website or their Facebook page. And to finish today on a bit of good news, a couple of days ago, Ben Dean from Cheshire established that UCOG, who was David Lenegas's company, but he got bounced out after we exposed him as the blagger that he is. But he still walked away with about £600,000. So I guess, you know, from his point of view, you know, it's a case of, you know, who cares? But anyway, UCOG, who of course have the Gatwick Gusher at Horse Hill, although funnily enough there's not too much activity going on there, so it can't be that much of a gusher, can it? But they had the license to exploit the southern half of the Isle of Wight, and it seems that they have now relinquished that license. So it looks like the Isle of Wight is off the hook. Doesn't mean to say that the rest of the south of England can rest easy, but at least that's a step in the right direction. So next week I'm going to be looking at some of more of Ben Dean's research, because we're going to be looking at the way in which the Oil and Gas Authority, which of course is a private limited company, the sole shareholder is the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, which just so happens to be Greg Clark. And we're going to look at how the Oil and Gas Authority has unilaterally upgraded a number of the petroleum exploration and development licenses to the development phase. Now, there is a requirement that to be able to do that, the license holder has to submit a development plan. But such is the push to get this industry underway, it would seem that the Oil and Gas Authority have operated way beyond their remit and have upgraded some of these licenses to the development phase. So next week we'll be looking at the Oil and Gas Authority and Dr. Andy Samuel, who is in the leadership role of the Oil and Gas Authority, and of course, you know, they have a remit which is to promote the exploitation of hydrocarbons within the UK, both onshore and offshore. So I'm going to take a break for the weekend. I'm going to actually be still in the south of England, but if you do get an opportunity, if you're in the southeast, come up to Leith Hill, visit the camp, visit the village of Cold Harbour, take a walk through these ancient forests and see for yourself how ridiculous and absurd it is that anyone in their right minds could even begin to think that this is a suitable location for a well site. To say nothing of how the hell they're going to get the infrastructure up and down these very narrow, these very ancient sunken lanes. So, as is always the case, please don't take my word for anything that I say. That's not the purpose of what I do. My sole purpose is to stimulate your curiosity so that you will take a look at this for yourselves and encourage others to take a look at this for themselves, and that we can shut this down by sheer weight of numbers who are constantly badgering their elected representatives to do the right thing and pull the plug. So meanwhile, have a great weekend, and I will catch up with you on Monday morning at 8:30. Thanks for joining me. Now just enjoy the view here for a second. And the tranquility. And then imagine that all you can see our rigs and well sites and the pollution that emanates from an industry that has no place here or anywhere else in the UK.